we have the request from Fredonia Chamber of Commerce and the Fredonia's Farmers Market to hold the first annual Fredonia Farm to Table Community Dinner on Saturday, September the 29th, 2019, in Barker Common East. Want to say something about it, Carol?
A lot of people have been working together, farmers market and Festivals Fredonia and the Chamber of Commerce. And I hope that people go. It's going to be wonderful, and pray for good weather. It's a wonderful event for the community to come together and to highlight our local farmers and local business people who are going to be providing the food, the local chefs. So it's just something that's very exciting, and a lot of hard work has gone into it, and a lot of hard work is going to continue to go into it. So
That's great.
I hope we have a good turnout.
Forward to it. Great. And then we have a schedule of meeting for from July to December 2019.
We had a question. Aren't summer meetings earlier? Summer meetings are usually at
Usually.
7 rather than 7:30, correct?
We can change that. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's,
Okay.
that's
I'll
my
change it,
fault.
yeah.
But, yeah, I didn't see it. Yeah, you're right. 7 o'clock.
So you want to change them all to start
Just
at
to-
7?
August
Three
7,
July and
yes.
the 2
Oh, no,
August.
no, through August end.
Just
through
the
the end
July
of
and
Au-
August meetings, right?
Yes,
just
just
July
July
and
and
August
August, yes.
meetings. We'll begin at 7 PM,
At 7, yes.
and then.
From September 9th on,
to-
7:30 as before.
The workshop at 6:30?
The workshop.
Workshop at 6, meeting at 7.
Well, we gotta change that down here then, too.
Oh, and so the workshops will start at 6 for them.
So the workshop at 6 for these 2 months. And then the meeting is 7 for these
Okay.
4 meetings. All right, very good. Thank you, Carol. Bless you. And then we have a training request of Michael Woodward to attend the review class for the ABC exam. Okay. Have the stall proposal for hazardous materials related services in relation to Fredonia Fire Department exterior upgrades. I think you got the information. All it is that as we're trying to start the outside, the renovation of the outside of the fire hall, they found some asbestos and they found some mold, correct? And we have to, work on them, see how much it is, remediate it, so we can start. And then we have the request from Village Hall staff to close the Village Hall the day after July 4th holiday.
On that, all the employees involved are going to use their own time.
They're
We're
going to
not
use
paying-
their own
They're not
time.
getting paid extra for
No,
a
they're
day to
using
spend
their
on
own
their schedule.
time. Yeah, their own personal day.
And they all have time available? And they
Oh,
will- they all.
Before we bring it here, yes, we
Well, I just
check
want to make
that.
sure that's all, I mean, I just saw
We check
the
that.
request was there and that they, so they all agree that that's what they would like to do.
No, Michelle is very careful, so I can
Mhm.
assure
Just wanna
you
make
that
sure.
we are fine.
Mhm.
If somebody fails to do that, he's going to be, or she is going to be the only person in the Village Hall,
Right, and we wouldn't want that. No, so
or he's not going to get paid.
Otherwise,
No, we
I'm
don't.
okay with that.
And then we have the schedule of band concerts in the gazebo for the year 2019. And then we have the food truck fee resolution, something we're going back and forth so many times over the weekend. Was a discussion about that. Again, just to make something very clear, first of all, we did look in other communities. We did not reinvent any kind of wheels here. We are offering 2 options, either a $500 year-long fee or $50 per day per event, which is not cumulative. So it's up to the vendors to do that. Now, I understand there was question about the background checks. On that, I understand both sides, I have to say. So it's totally going to be up to the board what they want to do. I mean, I understand these are people we don't know. They come to the village, they sell their stuff. So there you go, background check. On the other hand, we use so many people, like pizza delivery people. Who checks them? No one. So
I
that's
also
my-
think that I mean, anything can happen, but I believe that the food trucks that they're trying to get to come here are established businesses that are at other events all throughout Western New York. So they are companies that have been,
Reputable.
right,
And we certainly hope so, and most probably that's what they are. The city of Buffalo requires background checks. Many other villages, cities, towns do not. So it's a big discussion all over the country right now. So if we don't have anything else on that,
Well, the resolution as written today does not include any change to that portion. So I'm fine with going forward with the resolution, the way it's written. And I believe that Chief Brad Myers really explained that quite well. You know, it's a beginning, and I think I like the way he described the way, you know, we should proceed, and it seems to work pretty well. During the last meeting,
no, I remember, yes, we discussed it. So is everybody, if everybody's okay?
I'm not.
I know. You're not. Yes, I'm sorry.
The only thing that's new about the proposal is the $50 fee for a single day.
Correct,
So,
correct.
so the item about the local owners is already contained in the existing law.
Yes, that's correct. The reason I wrote it this way
Yeah.
is because that section 5 covers the fees, and because there's been so many discussions, so much back and forth, and we heard from several people at the public hearing on that, or, you know, the public meeting, that there was a lot of confusion about that, so I wanted the whole thing laid out very simply. These are the 3 things that go in the fees section. So yes, that hasn't changed at all, but I just wanted to lay it out nice and simple, also 1, 2, 3. Otherwise, we just would have had a 2 and a 3, which wouldn't have made a whole lot of sense.
Well, you'd only have, the only thing that's new is 3. The one-day permit fee shall be $50.
Right, I thought it was important to include the $500 because we had gone back and forth on that too. We had had numbers as high as Buffalo's, 800 and something, or as low as 250, and we had gone back and forth. So it's just for clarity, Dr. Burris.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, number 1 and 2, it's just for clarity there. All right. And then finally, the permit for Cynthia Conti for the Italian Festival. And now, Mr. Vollmer, hello, welcome. If you want to come the front and give us a presentation. I sent everybody everything that you sent me, so they know where we are and why we're discussing this today.
Okay.
So thank you for.
Well, thanks for having me here tonight. I guess is everyone aware, first of all, that the village owns almost 400 acres of property across the tracts associated with the watershed. I assume everybody understands that. Okay, thank you. I guess I just wanted to address the board and, tell you, I guess, a little bit of background about us and our role here with the watershed. We've actually been serving the village of Fredonia since 1991. At that time, we developed a management plan for the property, did some activities up there, and then another plan was written again. That plan was updated in 2006. We had a timber sale in 2007 that generated about $41,000 off of the Glasgow Road property. And then, of course, then after that, we had a pretty significant recession that changed a lot of things in the timber industry, and changed a lot of things with all the work that we were doing. A number of things got tabled. But we did attempt to work with the village to do another harvest on the Spoden Road tract in about 2010. That time we were working with Mayor Sullivan and Rob Lancaster and Sam Dreo, who was the village attorney at that time. I guess there was a lot of communications back and forth. There were some issues with the access to the property, and over that time, everything kind of came to a standstill and stalled out until recently when Chris gave me a call and followed up on the existing management plan, and that prompted a meeting between myself and Chris and the mayor. And we talked about a lot of the issues with the watershed and the importance of forest management and how that plays a role in clean water, as well as being a valuable asset for the village. Out of that almost 400 acres, you got about 285 of it that we would classify as manageable for timber. And well, that's, I guess in some circles, managing for timber is a scary thing when you're talking about water supply, because things can go wrong and that can be a potential problem for your water supply. But if done correctly and carefully, it can be a positive thing for your watershed. Healthy forest does a great job of filtering water and cleaning air and all of those other great environmental benefits. In your own case, though, we've gone a long period of time without any real significant, management on the property. The plan that we have, and this is the reason why a proposal was drafted, is because, we're about 12 years now since the last plan was written. There hasn't been any activity on the property since that time, and a lot of the information is old. And it probably needs to be brought up to current standards. We need to have eyes on the property again and basically get you kind of a new plan, a new direction, and see what's happening out there. Some of the issues that particular forest is facing, in addition to just being an opportunity to make some income through the harvest of timber, it's not just a bank account that you draw from. There has to be some inputs into it to ensure its sustainability. And that's what your management plan does for you, is it outlines the guidance needed to make it healthy, productive, and sustainable. One of the big issues, and I'm sure everybody knows, one of the issues we have here in Chautauqua County with our forests is grapevines. We have a very healthy grape industry here in Chautauqua County, but unfortunately, birds like to eat grapes and birds like to spread them. So unfortunately, they find their way into our woods, and that is an issue up there in the watershed. And the problem with grapevines is over time they can actually overtake trees. They're sun lovers. They're going to climb. They're going to seek the upper crown and create an arbor up there. And in the right circumstances, and we've seen it up there, there are areas where there are large amounts of acreage, as much as sometimes 5 acres or more in size, that over time have been just completely taken over by grapevines. They eventually kill the trees, they knock them back, until finally they're the only thing that occupies that site and nothing else can grow there. There are other areas where they're not taking over. We don't know what the status of the grapevine alone is. We would classify it as an invasive species. We don't know where that's at in time and space over this last 12, 15 years. And then one of the other issues that have come into our backyard is, there's an invasive insect called the emerald ash borer that has spread, vastly. It's heavy here in this part of the county, and we have no idea if that's impacted the timber resource, let alone the forest resources as a whole over there. So enough time has passed between growth, potentials for mortality, and other issues that the old plan, unfortunately, is just outdated. And in order to really manage this property well, it's our recommendation that you have a new plan drafted for the property so that you can, I guess, start fresh. And of course, I'll just back up a little bit. One of the reasons that our last attempt to, move forward the harvest, I'll say derailed for the lack of a better term, because I really don't know what happened. We had extensive communication up front with Rob about putting together a timber harvest in one of the stands there. The access for that part of the property, and I'm talking about the extreme southern end of the property, there's really no road frontage there, and probably at the time as all that property was being accumulated by the village, the purpose was to provide the biggest buffer you could around the reservoir and protect that watershed from outside influence. And probably nobody thought really ahead about providing good access to that area in case you wanted to manage that asset. So there's really very little road frontage on that southern end. And one of the best ways in there is actually an old railroad bed that borders the property. That railroad bed, though, is owned by Niagara Mohawk, or is it National Grid? One of them. I think it's National Grid. Why they came about it, I'm not really sure. Probably because it provided some kind of access to some of their right-of-ways for power lines, but they own that right-of-way. We contacted them, and they were willing to allow us to use the road. It's all it is now, is just a road to access that property. There was some paperwork that needed to be done, but one of our discoveries was that because they're not actively using it at that time, part of it had washed out where there were some culverts, and they were significant enough that in order to get in there, those needed to be repaired. We had suggested that maybe the village use its own manpower, materials, equipment to do those repairs rather than hire them out, or rather than build them into the timber sale and have the cost of that come out of that value. Thought it might be cheaper and more economical for the village to do that. And Rob was working on that. And then things kind of went quiet. There was some communications back and forth between myself and Rob and the mayor, and then I made repeated attempts to contact Rob with no responses after that, and things just went cold. And I figured at the time there probably were just much bigger issues for the village to worry about than this, and that it had just been kind of put to the back burner. And so rather than continue to pester them, I just sat back and said, well, they'll get a hold of us when the time is right. And then Chris got a hold of me. So, but it's been several years. So that's kind of the background of where we've been recently and our past history with the village. But I guess we're grateful for the opportunity to continue working with the village, and I guess it's in your hands now to decide how you want to proceed. And so I guess if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. I hope I didn't ramble around too much.
No, it was excellent. Yes.
Okay.
Have you been up there recently to check that right of way?
No, we haven't had any call to be up there, so.
Okay. I'm assuming it's probably in a lot worse shape than it was.
Quite possibly, unless for some reason National Grid needed to be up there and they made the repairs themselves, but, and they were aware of that. I mean, we brought it to their attention, but of course, because they had no need, it was up to the village to fix it if they wanted to use it. Otherwise, it would sit there until they're ready to use it. So it's possible that repairs have been made, but I'm gonna gamble more that they weren't.
Probably not, yeah.
Mr. Dunn?
Is that located on the Spoden Road side of the reservoir?
Yeah.
Let's see.
I believe so. Let's see here.
with those drawings and those?
No, actually, that goes off Glasgow.
Off of
That,
Glasgow.
that railroad
Is that
bed
here?
intersects
Oh,
with Glasgow.
Fredonia Stockton Road is where you would go in at, and
Yep.
it's kind of parallel to Glasgow.
Okay.
I asked about Fredonia Park on Glasgow Road, which borders on the north end of Upper Cassadaga Lake. So it's a 40-acre plot. Do you have any information about that?
Well, that was where we did that timber harvest back in 2007. On that property, yeah, that property's 43 acres in size. Half of it, the southern half, is basically all wetland and swamp. The northern half was, higher, drier ground and manageable for timber, and that's where that harvest last occurred. So of course, that certainly has changed since our plan. The plan was done in 2006, and then immediately followed with a timber harvest.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yep.
I think about 8 years ago, there were discussions about harvesting two similar-sized plots. One was Boy Scout Camp Mers in Mayville, and the other was the College Lodge in Brockton. So the Boy Scout camp was harvested, but there were protests among the university faculty. I went to one of those meetings in the middle of the summer. I think almost 400 people involved in the university showed up. And the upshot of it was that there was no harvest. So, and
This is
Professor John.
what college is this now? Fredonia?
SUNY Fredonia.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that. I don't think we weren't involved with that.
No, you weren't, but, I went to this meeting and
Sure.
I was very impressed by the amount of interest among the people associated with the college in this issue.
Sure.
So, the fact that you're not familiar with it is the main question I have. So, Professor
Well,
Titus is.
I am familiar with the Boy Scout camp because we manage Camp Mers.
I see.
Yes.
Professor Titus feels very strongly that there should be no forestry efforts in the forest.
Yep, there are those that feel that way.
Yes. So,
I guess my only response to those of that is, and I think that's because people don't like to see the disruption. There's no doubt that a harvest does disrupt your forest, and in short term, it might not look very pretty. I guess it all depends on how it's done, of course. But at the same time, those folks lean towards wanting just to let nature do its own thing. My response to that is that, our landscape has been culturally influenced by man for so long now that we really don't have too much of a choice but to manage it if we want it to be what we want it to be, if we want some kind of desired outcome. And I guess I use the example of the village's watershed. If trees have a lifespan, they need to replace themselves if we want to have a sustainable forest. Sometimes the forest is not capable of doing that on its own without help. And that's, I guess, what we do. For example, when you introduce an invasive species like grapevine or honeysuckle or ferns or some of these other species that will take over a site, and they have the ability to keep anything else from regenerating on that site, eventually your trees are going to die. They have a lifespan. And if they can't replace themselves with the same species, something else is going to fill that void. Nature abhors a vacuum. So something is going to grow there. The question is whether it is what we want it to be, and what is going to be healthy for our landscape. And so my feeling is that if we don't introduce a little bit of man into the mix to counter what man has done, then, the results may not be what we want to be. It might take a long time. And that's why I guess all of us are entrusted with the care of these resources, for the future. We don't want to be the ones that they look back on and say, boy, I wish they had taken care of this problem a long time ago, and we wouldn't be faced with it now. We already experience that today. I don't know if that answered a question or...
It's very interesting. Professor Titus's position is that the main concern is sedimentation in the reservoir. Sure. And his position is that no management efforts needs to be taken, regardless of what sort of vegetation you have. It will stabilize the soil. So you mentioned grapes taking over. Grapes typically have very deep roots, and this 40 to 100 feet. And this suggests to me that would stabilize the banks of the reservoir very well. So
Potentially.
They also don't have any value. Grapevines don't
Well-
have any value. Grapevines don't have any value.
Yeah, but
A managed forest could actually be an asset.
A managed forest is going to be much better at filtering water than a grape arbor
And
will
air.
be. And a grape arbor wasn't meant to be there. We introduced that by bringing that in as an agricultural crop. And I know we're only talking about one particular factor here, but the other thing that grapevines do is when they bring that upper canopy down, because that's what they really ultimately want to do. They don't want to be tall and growing up in the crown. That's not their nature. Their nature is to spread out as far as they can. That also changes the temperature of the ground. I mean, they're bringing a lot of sunlight further down. You're changing the shading on that site. Your grapevines they can
And the
have
way-
a very
the way
negative impact.
The snow melts if you change the temperature.
Exactly. That's water quality is tied to temperature of that water, certainly filtration. I mean, if his main concern is silt getting into the reservoir, that's a valid concern. Done properly and with the right buffering and the right practices on the ground with the harvest, that can be, minimized certainly. And by maintaining forest cover, which is what we're trying to do, and that's what I'm talking about, by making sure we've got good tree cover. Tree roots go deep as well and are widespread, and they're a stable organism when they're properly cared for. Long term, they're going to be a much better filter for that water than a grapevine. If you were to change that all over to grapevines.
well, I think the main thing is that the concern of the village should be for water quality.
Yep.
And the discussions about how much the various sorts of trees could provide in terms of market value is really against the interests of the people of Fredonia. So,
Well,
I don't think
if
it's
it's
against
managed
the-
sustainably,
Yeah.
you'll have continuous forest cover, you'll have a healthy, robust forest, and a valuable forest. So it can provide all of those functions simultaneously if it's
right.
done
But
properly,
what I'm trying to
with
say,
water quality being the main concern.
we have concerns in the village about the health of our people.
Sure.
And that's our prime concern.
Yep.
And we have, if we attempt to market various properties of the village and get income from that, then we intrude into the private economy. And that's not a proper function of government, which respects the will of the people.
Isn't the management, wouldn't that be a secondary function of what's going on? I mean, obviously, I thought managing the forestry would considerably cut down on the sediment because of
Exactly.
trees and everything being so close to our reservoir, and But I guess the marketing of the lumber would be a secondary plus. I mean, you have to get it out, you have to remove some trees and so forth and keep everything healthy, so I don't see it as an intrusion.
I disagree with that, absolutely.
And I mean, I want to make something clear. The main reason that I wanted you to come was the management of the forest and the quality of the water and the quality of the air. Now, the extra money is always welcome, but it was not the reason I started this. The reason I invited you was not to make money. So that's I have to clarify that for
It's
Well,
a- it's a
and any-
possibility of a benefit. It's not guaranteed either.
It's not guaranteed.
The first priority would always be, and of course, you set the goals and the marching orders for us, but, knowing what we know about this forest and its ultimate purpose, our first goal would be to make sure that it is a healthy, productive forest. By doing that, you will get the secondary benefits of it generating revenue, it protecting your water supply, and so on. So they're not mutually exclusive.
No, of course
So
not.
as part of managing that, so what you're saying is like the grapevines or any of the invasive species that would harm the trees would then be removed or killed somehow or cut down at least to protect the trees throughout the entire?
That could be one of the treatments that's recommended.
Throughout
We would
the entire stand?
evaluate the intensity or the density of those species, and if we felt that it is a problem that threatens the sustainability or the health of the forest, then we would make a recommendation that they be treated in some way.
Then you would also remove any trees based on the stand itself, the type of trees tend to be healthier with the ability to have a certain canopy.
Sure.
And
Yep.
so you would thin the trees to provide the best option, or best ability for those trees to grow healthy and strong.
Correct.
And also remove diseased trees or trees that have, the bugs of different, whatever that's going to kill them. Insects.
Forestry actually mimics what happens in nature. I mean, all of the tools that we use and the science that's behind forestry is based on natural mechanisms. We just do it in a controlled manner.
Tony?
So,
I just had a quick question. How long would an assessment take of that area if you were set forth on that?
I can tell you. I just can't tell you from memory. We figured the inventory would take five men for a day. We would have the inventory completed. So 5 man days to do the inventory, and then time to put the management plan together.
I think it would be prudent, just from my standpoint and Chris's, to get current idea of what we're dealing with versus 15-year-old information or whatever it is. And then for you people, it would be a more favorable instrument for you to base a decision on. And again, the money, I agree, is not why any of this was initiated by Chris and the mayor. We talked to Mr. Slota. I mean, the concern is the reservoir, its quality, the water. But there again, before any of us, including myself, could make a personal opinion, or you people decide whether to go forward, I think we need to have current information to dwell upon.
And if I could, I can speak to Craig's opinion, because I've had 2 of my clients use him in his capacity as an arborist before. There aren't that many arborists around. Both of them were really impressed with, his opinion, the quality of his work, not just wanting to clear cut stuff, but actually doing what an arborist does. Tony, you and I know one of them in Portland. But, yeah, I can vouch for the fact that his work as an arborist has been excellent.
Nobody likes clear cutting. I
Nope.
can't stand it. It's
Chris?
totally.
Well, and I'll say, and not that I would recommend that necessarily for the watershed, but clear cutting looks ugly, but done properly, it is actually a viable tool that we use. And there are times when we have to do a heavier kind of cutting to create the conditions that will stimulate new growth. A lot of our species that grow around here are considered shade intolerant, which means they need full sunlight to grow. And so as a forest matures, and you can think of it, I don't want to dumb it down to an agricultural crop, but you can think of it a lot like a cornfield. You know, the seed is put down, it grows up, and then it's harvested in the fall. It just takes 100 years to get there in your forest instead. But a lot of our forests are what we call even aged, which means they're all the trees out there, for the most part, or at least the main canopy of trees, are all about the same age. And not every small tree in the woods is small because it's younger. Some of those are small because they're genetically inferior. They're runts, and they've been pushed into subordinate positions. They have no future potential. And you know, the science that we've learned and with our experience, we're able to identify those trees where somebody else walking through the woods might say, hey, look at all these young trees out here. And one of the myths that's promoted out there is that, oh, you got to cut all your big trees to make room for your little ones. Well, what if your little ones have no real future
There's a reason
potential?
for their
You
little
know,
ones.
you know, if you want a good example, walk into any plantation, like a softwood plantation. There's plenty around here where they planted pines all in rows, and you're going to walk in that woods, and you're going to see trees this big, and you're going to see trees this big, and they were all planted at the same time. But those little ones are not younger. They weren't naturally seeded in. They just didn't have the genetics to keep up. And so when we're managing a forest over time, eventually it gets mature. And when it reaches that mature state, we're faced with a decision. Do we just, you know, we hands off with it at this point? Or do we do some management to create the conditions we need to get new growth? And that's that kind of the end of the line for it. Now, I don't prescribe clear cutting, but I do prescribe, we call it a shelter wood. And that's where we'll remove a lot of the timber to create canopy holes, to get sunlight to the ground so we can get new seedling growth. And then if we do any harvesting after that to release that, it's lighter, and it's meant to not take everything off, because we don't want that either. We want to give that new stuff a chance to grow and establish a new age class of trees, a new canopy underneath,
Thank you.
and
Chris?
then work the two together over time.
Yeah, if I may, Dr. Ferris, not to disagree with your opinion whatsoever, but as trustees of the village and doing what we do for pay, to quote Dr. Leopold, Elder Leopold, Mother of the Ecology, we should all be stewards of nature. I mean, so basically that comes with a couple of different aspects: management, conservation, and so on. I think what we're proposing here, I'm sure what we're proposing here is a management plan, catching up to like Tony was saying. Nobody's going to cut down any trees or do anything right now at all. We need to see where our forest is in the meantime. And they do it all over the watershed, especially in New York City. I just meet some of the folks out there, and they're surrounded all through the Catskills. Once their canopies become taken over by invasive species, sometimes the trees will, die out, and then you have the dry and arid environment, which actually promotes more of the sedimentation and the dust and then more invasive species, tree rot, things like that. I mean, so when I came on board and we saw that plan sitting there, I was like, well, maybe we should continue on with the original stewardship that there were, all of our forefathers, I guess, past couple mayors, whatever, started to think about on that property. So it never was about clear cutting or anything like that. And everybody's, I know some village do it, there's opinions about all that stuff, and it's a big issue in the world. The ecology, and there's opponents and proponents. And so I was just thinking, they're a very reputable company, and we should at least carry on with some of see what we have there, the inventory, the surroundings up there. And we walked through there, and then we did not want a little bit in the past, but if you walk through some of the areas you're talking about, it really is taken over with mine, you can barely even walk through there, so I'm imagining sooner or later that's gonna come down without any treatment or at least, you know, some practices, management practices up there, so that's basically how this all, you know, was described. Not to, it wasn't a financial, even in some of the old paperwork there, it says in some of the introductions in the abstract that this isn't a gold mine, you know what I mean? It's not a bank account per se, and that's not what they were looking for in the initial stages of doing this plan either. It was to carry on the stewardship up there and protect the watershed. So we're gonna have opponents of it, I'm sure. But at the same time, I think with a company like this one here, they're gonna bring us the best scientific practices and methodology for managing up there, at least, and then throw the ideas at the folks again to see if it'd be costly or whatever, right, to move forward.
Well, you mentioned New York City. New York City has, one of the largest urban populations in the world. They all need water, and they don't get it from there. They get all of their water from the Catskills and the lower Hudson region of New York. And they own extensive numbers of acres and have a whole department of foresters that are just tasked with managing that. And they do manage their forest for timber, but it is for sustainable forest so that it can provide the important function that it does for the water supply. And then they have extensive programs with there's another nonprofit agency called the Watershed Ag Council, which is directly funded by New York City, that has landowner outreach and logger outreach programs where they provide information, provide management planning on private land, cost share funding, so they can encourage as many private landowners to manage their lands well, because they're part of the watershed too. The city just can't own it all. They try to buy as much as they can when the opportunity comes, but if they can promote volunteers to do, good management on their lands, it only adds to their success.
Well, if there isn't anything else, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good presentation. Thank you, indeed. We will look through the proposal,
Yeah, feel free to call me with any
and
questions.
I will definitely call you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
all right, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Are we going to discuss any,
All right.
are we going to discuss any of the costs associated with that today?
With what?
I mean, the costs associated with the
Yes, I mean,
management.
you have a proposal.
Right.
So if,
Can
I don't know, if you want to think about it, if you want to discuss it today,
I mean, I don't mind giving it a little discussion today.
okay.
Proposal was 6,525 $6,525 for phase 1 and 2.
Are there any questions about the proposal itself at this time you want me to answer, or?
Is there, do you have any questions about the proposal?
No, the proposal for you at this minute anyhow.
So,
I was just looking at the costs there. I mean, personally, I would like to see, they have the upgraded options that we could add to that number. I don't think that they're that significant in pricing. I think that we should include all three of those upgrades, specifically the financial analysis of revenues, in order to determine how much we could, as a projected idea of how much we can afford if we have to come up with any money when they do give us their analysis and data and the possible costs of the management overall, so that we could then determine those costs and what we can afford for, into the future. Maybe, do we have to add more funding to it in next year's budget, or do we have to, or will that stand provide enough revenue to cover those costs? To actually do the management?
About $10,000 altogether.
it's about 10,000.
So I've approximately 10,000, approximately about 10,000, correct? Mhm.
Jim?
The last report you did, you laid out a 10-year plan for maintenance. Is that part of what this proposal would entail?
Yeah,
That's
it
part of
should
it.
be actually probably 15 years.
15
Gone
years,
to
so-
Pushing that out a little bit
Okay.
further.
So everything is gonna be done all at once. I mean,
If you do it all at once, right,
Every
then-
year, there would be
For
certain
certain
things we would need to do, which we didn't do this last time,
Right.
except cut the timber, basically, I guess, and, so it would be part of the overall plan, and,
I mean, I like long-term plans, and I prefer to manage in that way. So it gives us a good indication into the future where we're at. So I would prefer to do it that way, that's my opinion.
And now just the financial analysis, even though it's a projection,
Right, correct.
it's not perfect.
No,
But it does at least give you an idea of what the possibilities might be in terms of, income generation, but it also will show by building in growth and harvest,
right.
what the sustainability of the asset is, at least from a volume standpoint.
Mhm.
And it helps with decision-making, just like you said.
That's what I
If there are costs along the way, which there will be, now you can at least weigh those against the revenues. And we try to do our best too to, when we're massaging that schedule around and looking at, okay, we have work that needs to be done, can we time that with an income event so that
Right.
maybe some of the income can go directly against that and try to minimize the direct out-of-pocket cost? So there's ways to manage that too.
If I could just make one more point, please. With the introduction of the invasive species that have been taking over a lot of the forest and a lot of New York State, there's new ones every day. We don't have a staff of entomologists. These guys do. And there's an actual new one. You said the hemlock, there's a hemlock.
Yeah, the hemlock woolly
They
adelgid.
just found it in Rwanda, so I mean, we're not keeping an eye on that kind of stuff. It's just gonna take over. We're putting extra grant applications out for source water protection, which is a huge thing right now around the state and the country. So this is just one part of that I just wanted to
If I
be
may,
involved with.
this is one of the older maps that we produced for the watershed, and it's the red this was infrared photography taken with leaf off. Anything that's red in there is a softwood, a conifer, and most likely it's hemlock. That's one of our dominant softwood species here in the region. And not that I have answers of what to do, but at least you need to be aware that if you have that much hemlock, the hemlock woolly adelgid is a very aggressive invasive species, but it moves very slow. So I'm just calling it aggressive and slow at the same time. But it was found in Rwanda. I believe that they tried to get that under control. It's been moving up from the south as our temperatures appear to be warmer, at least in this period of time. It's more conducive to it. And I've been in places where it's in the lower Hudson in New York, terribly. I have a large client that owns land down there, and all of their hemlock are pretty well just gone. Now, why is that important to you? Hemlock is a critical species, not only for habitat, but it's a critical species for watershed management. Because what hemlock does is because it has needles, it's a conifer, so it's evergreen. When we get our winter snows, which is important here, maybe not in other parts of the country, but here it is, our winter snows under that hemlock stay cooler longer. They melt slower. And what that means is now you have cooler waters entering your water supply slowly over time versus all at once in the spring like you'll have under a pure hardwood forest. So they slow the melt down. And that means you're getting cooler water later on in the snow melt season. That also means that your waters in your reservoir are cooler, longer, which means fewer algae outbreaks, or they come on later and not earlier and stay longer. And it's an important issue for water quality. New York City is scared to death of it because they're right on the front lines of that insect. And they know that when it goes through their watershed, and it's already starting, and they lose their hemlock forest, City of Syracuse, same thing. When they lose that, it's going to drastically change the water quality. And at their scale, it's much different than Fredonia for sure. But still, it makes it important. You know, and one of our, knowing that and the importance of that, we would manage, even though hemlock is not a valuable species, we would not discriminate against that unless it was an unhealthy tree. We would actually want to try to promote that along with all the other species. Species diversity is kind of important. And so maintaining that cover is pretty critical. I have no answers when it comes to this insect. There's probably no way to stop it other than to have the healthiest forest you can possibly have and keep it in there as long as possible and hope that it kind of stays at our southern border and doesn't creep too much further up. So I bring that up not to instill fear, but certainly to make you aware that, you know, your hemlock is a vital, important component of your watershed, and we would view it that way as we conducted the management there. So,
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I have a question about an emergency that occurred on Wednesday afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I saw fire trucks with flashing lights at the entrance to Village Hall on Wednesday afternoon
Well, Dr.
at
Barris,
3:30 and 4:30.
And yes, it was an accident with some chemicals in the basement.
What were those chemicals?
So
Why
for-
were they there?
Because they were cleaning. It was for some reason there, but it was totally out of precaution. We called the fire department. They were here. We evacuated people, as I said, as a precaution because of sulfuric acid and fear of chlorine gas. So at the end of the day, everybody's healthy. Ryan did an excellent work with the fire department. They were here for a couple of hours. They neutralized the sulfuric acid and cleaned it up, and then ventilated the building. And 4:30, I think you called me, and everything was clear. So,
Did we have a consult from the Chautauqua County Hazardous Wastes Office?
we
No, it
did
wasn't-
not,
It
no.
wasn't necessary because it wasn't, we're not talking about the Exxon Valdez, it was just a one, how big we say with a jar is, Ryan?
Probably 16 ounces.
Right. And our fire department was well able to take care of it.
Okay.
But the people were, given information, and so we are okay. End of the day. Anything else that we need to discuss?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make a final a comment in relation to what Forcon is doing. And I don't know the details, but I know you had a study completed by our engineers, and actually required by the state, to determine there's certain maintenance that we're required to do annually.
Yes, yes. correct.
And so I think we need to revisit that report and see how that might be coordinated with what's being proposed here.
Okay.
That's all I want.
That's a good idea, actually, we did discuss.
The other
Yes.
thing that I think you may be wanting to look at to link this is with the current upgrades proposed for the water plant reservoir. And the engineers have already been given a mission statement to assess needs relative to the area around the shoreline. Any external costs could be probably covered through the scope of the mission already given to the engineers.
So you're not duplicating, doing it twice.
Well, yeah, I mean, but then going forward, we would, if we develop a long-term plan, the board, the village would have to know what a projected annual expenditure would be to maintain a healthy forest. Then you have to budget it, but at least for the outset, you could marry this into a project that's already been approved and kicked down the road to get going.
That's a good point.
Save time, but that's secondary way to do it.
Jim, what you were talking about, the O'Brien and Gear water study
Yes.
report?
Yes.
There are certain issues in just maintenance were addressed that were supposed to be starting now, really. And over the next couple of years before we even consider doing anything, constructurally with the reservoir itself. But there's certain maintenance requirements that have to be done, and we're not doing anything. So I just think, and I don't know all the details, what I'm suggesting is we take a look at that report, revisit it, and see how this might interface with what is being proposed here. That's all I was suggesting.
Yeah, no, you're right, yeah, we discussed that before. I think we should revisit it and see where we should be. I mean, the quality of the water is my main concern, and the air, of course, but the water first.
Chris, just one more question. Chris or Tony, have either of you have any recent knowledge of that access road that goes, that he was mentioning on the
No, but I'd
south
like to
side?
take a look at it if well, we don't have that proposal or maps, or do you have the maps that he had that show that right away?
I think, Dr. Pearson, I think he's talking about where we were, right, on that railroad bed.
I was
On the railroad bed, yeah.
I think that's what he's talking.
But that is the railroad that's involved, but the area where we were does not border directly on the village property. So,
So, yeah, I'd like to go up and
I mean, it should be investigated,
Right.
just to understand how much work has to be done so that they can have that access if we proceed with this.
yeah, I'd be willing to work with Chris.
I mean, and as he recommended, that it could probably just be done in-house, but, you know, and that's,
And that's the first thing we should know,
yeah, we
where
should
we are
absolutely know.
right now.
Yeah, absolutely, in order to give them that access.
All
I mean, if they've already researched that they've been granted the ability to have the access, we just, but he did mention the possibility of a bit of a washout that needs to be addressed, so they
Right,
can get
that's
in.
part of the
So, but,
need to update a current assessment of everything
right,
related to.
so, but if you could do that, it'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry?
All right, yeah, no, I was asking about something else
Oh,
outside.
okay.
All right, so we should go straight to the meeting, if you're ready. I pledge
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, I call this meeting to order. A regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Fredonia, duly called and held on the third day of June 2019 at 7:30 p.m. in the second floor, Trustees Room, Village Hall, Fredonia, New York, and public notice of the time and place of this meeting has been given to the news media and conspicuously posted in one or more designated public locations in accordance with Section 104 of the Open Meetings Law.
Whereas members of this board present at this meeting have read the official minutes of the Board of Trustees regular meeting of May 20th, 2019. Now therefore be it resolved, this board approves the minutes as entered into the official minutes, and be it further resolved that the reading of the minutes be dispensed with.
I second the resolution.
Trustee Christina.
Yes.
Trustee Linden.
Aye.
Trustee Essek.
Yes.
Trustee Bridges is absent. Trustee Barris.
Aye.
This portion of the meeting is for public comment. Any member of the public wishing to speak, once recognized, shall stand and state their name and address. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes if speaking for themselves, or 5 minutes if speaking on behalf of a group. I will ask that the speakers to refrain from remarks that are in poor taste, slanderous, or not germane to any action taken or contemplated by the board.
Yes, Mr. Gleason.
My name is Michael Gleason. I own Gleason Enterprises Electrical Inspections. My address is 6524 Eigen Road, Mayville, New York. I'm here on behalf of my business. I was one of the electrical inspectors that represented the Village of Fredonia. And I just received a letter May 13th that I was no longer meet the requirements of the village and will need to immediately cease and desist inspections with no warning, no nothing. My goal here tonight was to find out why. I have some ideas, but we go back a year ago when you and I, Mayor Landis and I had a meeting and had some issues with some training. We had that resolved. I received a letter of March of 16 of 2018 from the mayor after I was removed from office, then reinstated. But the letter states, "It was my pleasure to reinstate you as electrical inspector of the Village of Fredonia. I wish to apologize for the village misunderstanding regarding your credentials. I have learned that the term certified inspector can be misleading, as you had explained during our meeting, and you have provided proof that you have passed the test from the International Association of Electrical Inspectors, and indeed all the present code requires. The confusion arose when the village was notified that your IAEI certification had lapsed. The village electrical board misunderstood the difference between certified and being certified. It's two different things, how you read it in the international. The misunderstanding was passed up the chain to the village code enforcement offices and ultimately to my office. By the time we reached your desk, there appeared to be a legitimate public safety issue, which I never argued with her on any of this. And I know that both being a fireman, which I am a fireman of 32 years, also was a deputy fire coordinator for 9 years for Chautauqua County for emergency services. So my whole goal was to always protect the people of Chautauqua County, Cattaraugus County, Allegheny County that I represent as an inspector. So following her meeting, she requested that the village attorney review the matter, and after speaking with Keith Laughlin, which is from the IEI, he was the electrical inspector, Chris Dean, they immediately went on to regard me and reinstate me. The letter goes a long ways. I do have a copy. I'm sure that there's a copy here if anybody would like to read it for their own reading. There's some new changes I understand in the village of Fredonia on some of the requirements. I've never seen these. Still, the requirements on the website are the old requirements. I've been an inspector for the village since 2012. I've never had an issue till last year, and then thought it was resolved, and then I get a letter stating that I'm removed from an inspector again due to lack of training. Now, like I said, I inspect Chautauqua County, Cattaraugus County, part of Erie County, part of Allegheny Counny, with no problem. City of Olean, City of Jamestown, City of Dunkirk. This is the only village I've had issues with. And if there's something I need more, I have no problem going to get it, but tell me what I need. I'm not here to cause a fight. I just protecting my business and my livelihood. I represent a lot of great electricians here in the village. There's a lot of great people here, and I used to work for one that's Julius Leone, used to be my boss. I've had a great rapport with everybody that I've ever dealt with. And I had a great rapport. We had the problem taken care of with Mayor Landis last year. I assumed it did. So if there's more to it, I have no problem taking care of it. I have nothing, there's no issues on that. The biggest issue that I have is that I got released from my duties without a letter saying, you need to do this, you need to do this. We've changed our laws. You have 2 months to do it. You have a month to do it. You have 6 months to do it. Whatever it would be on the new rules. So that's what I'm asking for, is to get the actual updated new rules. And if there's stuff on there, I'll have no problem taking it. I take it throughout the county. I've got so many certifications that I could baffle you with a folder this thick that would do no good to anybody except for it's got a piece of paper that says I'm certified for it. So my goal here tonight was just to let everybody know what's going on. My concerns for representing my business, my name, my Gleason name, which has been in service for 50 years through my dad, and I've continued on with it. But in turn, I think there's some communications errors that we've had here, and I'd like to find out what's kind of going on. So, and on top of all this, then from what I understand, I have not seen it in writing yet. Some of the new requirements only rely on, when it's all done, there's only 2 inspectors in this county that can meet the requirements of the village of Fredonia. And the requirements came from the electrical board, which is what the board is supposed to do here in the village, but the guy that wrote the rules is my competitor. That's my issue, probably more than anything. I felt it was a conflict, that's my feeling, it's not anybody else's in this room, that's my feeling. I'm just stating my opinion. I have no problem with Mr. Dean, that's on the president of the board for that, but I just feel that there should be more to it. In the village, city of Jamestown, we both sit as liaisons on the board in Jamestown, excuse me. City of Dunkirk, same thing, we're a liaison to them. But I have no problem in the city of Dunkirk or the city of Jamestown to hold their license for what they want in the city of Olean. This is the only place in really 4
Right.
counties that I represent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gleason. Thank you very much. You will have your answer. Thank you. Okay, anybody else from the public? And I close the public portion. For my report, I don't have much except the fact that on Saturday we had this presentation by the architectural firm as to how the Barker Common is going to look. Unfortunately, I was out of town. I heard that it went very well. So this is good news. The other good news is that on Friday, there is a planning board special workshop regarding the new hospital. There are some good news regarding the second exit. I understand there is an agreement right now to have this second exit on Route 60. So we're looking forward to do this workshop on Friday. And then on next Wednesday, this proposal and these new plans are going to go in front of the planning board to be approved. So I think these are positive developments. I'm very happy to do that. So I will refer to Mr. Gard to answer your questions. Obviously, I just want to say, I know you, Mr. Gleason, very little from our communication last year. We had a few meetings, and they were fine. From that point on, I know Mr. Dean probably even less than that. So I don't have any personal feelings about anybody. We do have some new requirements, and our attorney is going to talk about them. Knows much more than I can explain right now. So that's my report. Any trustee, Christina?
I had a request from the Cable Advisory Board. They would like to see if there's interest in the public for people to be on the Cable Advisory Board, and they weren't sure how do we have to do an official notice, or how do we do that? Should
This is
there
the
be
official
something in the
notice.
paper? Okay, so if anybody's interested in being on the Cable Advisory Board, they can contact me, or they can contact Marcia Marins, or anybody else who's on the advisory board, if that's something that's interesting to anybody. It's hard work, but the people on the board are very dedicated and they're very good, but they're spread thin. They do a lot of other things, so if anybody's interested, please get a hold of anybody and let us know.
Thank you. Trustee Linden?
I have no report today.
Trustee Essen?
Yes, just real briefly, the mayor mentioned Joy and Daniel from KGB. Is it that they're KGB Landscape?
Yes.
They were here, they had examples of the new benches that they were proposing and the colorful movable furniture. I think a lot of people were quite interested in the movable furniture, which was kind of caught your eye quite well. And I think that was kind of a neat idea that they came up with for the committee. So I think a lot of people visited their booth and took part in the information gathering that they were given.
Very good, great. We have some boards outside, some pictures. At some point, we're going to bring them inside so everybody can see them. All right. Trustee Barris,
I have no comment today.
thank you. Mr. Gard?
Just to address, Mr. Gleason's comments and what really happened there. I have a little bit of a problem with Mr. Gleason saying that he didn't get a warning on this. I mean, I personally talked to him over a year ago, and I personally told him what requirements were coming in terms of certification and the way the codes were gonna be changed, after talking to the building inspector and to the electrical board. I also told him that part of the reason for the delay in the changes, because he was one of the very few inspectors in the village, was to allow him personally to come into compliance and get some certificates. So there was 13 months worth of personal notice there. Additionally, the law was passed correctly. We did have public notice of the law. We did have public meetings of the law. I'm sorry Mr. Gleason didn't know about it. If I was one of 2 inspectors in the village, it seems like I would have made it my business to know. But having had a discussion with the electrical inspector chair, which, by the way, I don't think having Christine as the chairman of that committee is a conflict, because he works in the business. Who else would we want on the electrical board? I mean, it would be silly to have the electrical board chaired by a watchmaker, all right? And that has been challenged around in other communities. Those are the people on the board. Those are the people that have expertise in the area. Those are the people the village relies on. So I appreciate that Mr. Dean doesn't feel like, or Mr. Gleason doesn't feel like he got a fair shake. I told him I would review his certificates. I would make sure that everything the village was doing currently was in compliance. But that's really the best we can do. And I'm sorry there was an inconvenience, but I mean, you will admit that I have been working with you for over a year on this, right?
Yes,
Okay.
a year ago with all the letters yours.
Thank you, Mayor, that's it.
All right, Mr. Darden, do you have anything?
I have nothing to report tonight.
Correspondence was received from Larry Fiorella, Treasurer, Fredonia Chamber of Commerce, and Peter Kalani, Market Manager, Fredonia Farmers Market, requesting use of Barker Common on Saturday, September the 28th, 2019, for the first annual Fredonia Farm to Table Community Dinner.
Be it resolved that the request from Larry Fiorella, Treasurer of Fredonia Chamber of Commerce, and Peter Kalani, Market Manager, Fredonia Farmers Market, for the first annual Fredonia Farm to Table Community Dinner is hereby approved, and for the use of Barker Common as follows. 1, use of Barker Common East and Church Street between Temple and Day Streets from 4 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Parking meters bagged as no parking on Church Street starting at 4 p.m. The FCCC and FFM will set up tables and chairs along with the tents, and the restaurants will set up portable cooking equipment on Church Street so that the chefs can prepare the meals and the participants to enjoy the meals. Number 3, request to suspend the open container law in Barker Common East only to allow for open consumption in the park from 5 to 8 p.m., as well as allow for wineries and breweries to sample and sell both wine and beer in the park during the event. Committee will provide cleanup assistance in the park after the event. Number 4, allow restaurant chefs to prepare meals on Church Street provided by a chamber member restaurant of our choosing. They will have all the necessary New York State certificates and catering permits to ensure they are in compliance with New York State laws. Number 5, allow for space within Barker Commons East for jazz musicians to perform during the event, as well as event sponsors set up informational tables to market their company. Be it further resolved that this resolution is subject to the receipt by the village of a certificate of insurance from the Festivals Fredonia Committee, which the village has received.
I'll second that.
Trustee Christina?
Yes.
Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Essek?
Yes.
Trustee Barris?
I abstain.
Resolutions.
Be resolved that the schedule of meetings of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Fredonia for the period of July 2019 through December 2019, as set forth and attached to these minutes, is hereby approved, and be it further resolved that the village clerk is hereby authorized to publish said notice in the Observer and to mail a copy of said schedule to WDOE Radio, the Jamestown Post-Journal, and the Buffalo News.
I second the resolution.
Trustee Christina?
Yes, but with the changes noted earlier.
Yes. Yes, of course. Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Essek?
Yes.
Trustee Barris?
Aye.
Be resolved that the training request of Michael Woodward, operator trainee, wastewater treatment plant, to attend the review class for the ABC exam in Morrisville, New York, June 14th, 2019, is hereby approved at a cost not to exceed $670. This conference is sponsored by Morrisville State College.
I second the resolution.
Trustee Christina?
Yes.
Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Essek?
Yes.
Trustee Barris?
Aye.
Whereas the village requires the services of an environmental contractor for the preparation of specifications and drawing documents and asbestos project monitoring for the renovations of the Fredonia Fire Hall, and whereas Wendell Engineering has recommended that the proposal of Stahl Environmental LLC to provide these services, and whereas Stahl Environmental LLC has agreed to provide the needed services at an anticipated cost of $3,345. Therefore, be it resolved that the mayor is hereby authorized and directed to enter into an agreement with Stahl Environmental LLC for the preparation of specification and drawing documents and asbestos project monitoring for the renovations of the Fredonia Fire Hall at an anticipated cost of $3,345.
I second the resolution.
Trustee Christina?
Yes.
Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Essek?
Yes.
Trustee Barris?
Aye.
Be it resolved, the village hall offices will be closed the day after July 4th, 2019, and that each village employee will use a personal or vacation day.
Second that motion.
Trustee Christina?
Yes.
Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Essek?
Yes.
Trustee Barris?
Aye.
Be resolved that the following agreements are hereby approved for the 2019 summer band concerts scheduled to be held in the gazebo from 6:30 PM to 8:30 PM in Barker Commons, to wit: June 26, 2019 Rustic Ramblers, July 3rd, 2019 Casadega Area Band, July 10th, 2019 Farina and Friends, July 17th, 2019 Wine and Whiskey, July 24th, 2019 JT Blues Band, July 31st, 2019 New Horizons, August 7th, 2019 Dixiecrats, August 14th, 2019 Dave Galando, August 21st, 2019 Sunset Bluegrass, August 28th, 2019 Bad Habit. Be it further resolved that the total amount to be spent for all the band concerts shall not exceed the sum of $3,850, and be it further resolved that the mayor is hereby authorized to sign said agreements on behalf of the village of Fredonia.
I'll second that.
Trustee Christina?
Yes.
Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Essek?
Yes.
Trustee Barris?
Aye.
Whereas the Village Board of Trustees is authorized by Chapter 197, Section 197-5, to determine the food truck application fees, therefore be it resolved, the fees for food trucks are hereby amended as follows. 1, any proprietor of a permanent structure located within the Village of Fredonia certified by the Chautauqua County Health Department for the preparation and/or serving of food is exempt from the fee. 2, the annual fee shall be $500. Then 3, the one-day permit fee shall be $50.
I second that.
Trustee Christina?
Yes.
Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Essek?
Yes.
Trustee Barris?
No.
Whereas the Board of Trustees for the Village of Fredonia are authorized by Chapter 81, Section 81-7C to suspend the open container law and allow alcohol sales, and whereas Cynthia A. Conti has applied for a permit for alcohol sales and consumption during the Italian Festival on June 29, 2019 in West Barker Commons, now therefore be it resolved, the village hereby approves Conti's application subject to the requirements of state and village law.
Second that motion.
Trustee Christina?
Yes.
Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Essek?
Yes.
Trustee Barris?
I abstain.
Okay, I think we're done. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
There's no more further business. I make a motion to adjourn.
I second that.
Trustee Christina?
Yes.
Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Essek?
Yes.
Trustee Barris?
Aye.
Have a good night. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.